You know, for centuries, the history we've all been taught has felt, well, incomplete. It's been a story of kings, battles, and big political moves, but what about the rest? Today, we're going to step into those quiet parts of the story, redraw the map, and uncover a much richer and, frankly, more accurate picture of our past. Seriously, just think about it for a second. What if that big, epic mural of human civilization you've always pictured has had half of its figures just left as blank outlines? That's what we're talking about, and today, we're going to start coloring them in.
And that is exactly where this idea of her story comes in. Now, this isn't just about adding a few famous women to the old timeline and calling it a day. Nope. It's about fundamentally re-examining everything. It's like shifting our camera angle from the battlefield to the village, from the halls of power to the home, to understand how societies actually worked.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll talk about why filling these historical gaps changes everything. Then we'll journey back to the ancient world, watch the birth of revolutionary ideas, see how the 20th century completely changed the game, and finally, land right here in the present to look at the fights still ahead. So, first things first, why does this even matter? Well, think about it. When history only focuses on wars and laws, it completely misses the fabric of everyday life. You know, how people were fed, how communities were held together, how economies actually ran day to day. Filling in these blanks isn't just about being fair, it's about realizing the story of humanity has always been a team sport, even if the storytelling hasn't been. All right, let's jump in our time machine and head way back. It's really easy to just paint the ancient world with one brush and say it was all patriarchy, full stop. But when you look closer, the reality for women was much more interesting. It was this complex dance between the official rules and the quiet, clever ways they found to have agency and influence. And check this out. This comparison is absolutely mind-blowing. In ancient Egypt, women had a legal status that was, well, kind of shocking for the time. They could own their own property, start divorce proceedings, even argue their own cases in court. Now compare that to so-called democratic Athens, where a woman was legally treated like a child her entire life, always under the thumb of a male guardian and basically shut out of public life. But here's the thing, legal rules were never the whole story. In all of these ancient societies, women's labor was the unsung absolute engine of the economy. I'm talking about everything from weaving the clothes everyone wore and managing the food supply to being brewers, bakers, and priestesses. Their work was essential for survival, even if it never got written down in the official records. Okay, let's leap forward to an age of massive change. You've got the Enlightenment with all these new radical ideas about liberty and individual rights. And while, yeah, most of the men who came up with them weren't thinking about women, they accidentally created the perfect intellectual toolkit for women to start demanding their own freedom. And this quote, wow, it just captures that moment perfectly. This is Abigail Adams, writing to her husband John while he's off helping build a brand new country. You can feel it right there. Women weren't just watching from the sidelines. They were starting to ask, hey, what about us? Why doesn't this promise of liberty apply to us too? So you can see how one thing led to another, right? The big ideas from the Enlightenment lit the fire for the French Revolution. But then, a key moment happened in 1840 when women who were active abolitionists were banned from a major anti-slavery conference. That exclusion was the last straw. It was the spark that led directly to the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, the official start of the organized women's rights movement in America. And now we hit the 20th century, and everything accelerates. The pace of change is just incredible. 2 world wars, and a whole host of powerful social movements would literally pull women into the public sphere in a way that was unimaginable before, and society would never be the same. 6 million. Just let that number sink in. During World War II, over 6 million American women went to work, many in heavy industry. That iconic image of Rosie the Riveter, she wasn't just a poster, she was real, and she represented millions of women who proved, once and for all, that they could build planes, ships, and tanks just as well as men. The old stereotypes were shattered. But what happened after the war? Well, there was this huge cultural push to get women to go back home, to be happy as housewives. This led to what author Betty Friedan so brilliantly called the problem that has no name. It was this quiet, simmering frustration felt by millions of women who were told this domestic dream was the pinnacle of happiness, but felt empty. And that quiet frustration, it exploded into what we now call the second wave of feminism. And this wave went way beyond just voting rights. The demands were deeply personal and absolutely revolutionary. They wanted equality at work, yes, but also the right to control their own bodies. They started to talk about and fight against domestic violence, making the personal political. And they challenged sexism everywhere, from TV shows to college curriculums.
Which, of course, brings us to today. All those past struggles have paved the road we're on now, but the journey for full equality is far from over. The fight just continues on new fronts, often supercharged by new technologies.
I mean, just take a look at these numbers. They really paint a picture, don't they? Globally, women still hold less than a third of the seats in parliaments. The pay gap is real. For every dollar a man earns, a woman earns about 77 cents. And they still do way more of the unpaid care work, the essential labor that keeps families and societies running, but often goes completely unrecognized.
And one of the most crucial ideas in today's conversation is this one: intersectionality. It's the understanding that you can't just look at sexism in a bubble. A person's life is shaped by all of their identities, their gender, their race, their class, their sexuality. And all these systems of power are tangled together. So a true fight for equality has to recognize and fight for everyone, acknowledging their unique experiences.
And of course, we have to talk about how technology has completely changed the game. The #MeToo movement is a perfect example. Tarana Burke started it years earlier, but in 2017 it went viral globally. Social media became a tool to break a worldwide silence, allowing millions to share their stories and forcing a public reckoning with abuse that had been hidden for far too long.
So when we look to the future, what's still on the to-do list? A lot. Things like getting to true political parity, finally closing that pay gap, ending the pandemic of gender-based violence, and making sure everyone has control over their own body. And it's also about making sure women's voices are front and center when we're trying to solve the biggest problems we face, like climate change.
So, after this whole journey, it's pretty clear how far we've come. The silences in our history books are definitely getting quieter. But have they disappeared completely? Not yet. And the work of listening for them, of uncovering the stories that are still hidden and continuing the fight for a history that includes everyone, well, that work is on all of us.